I always forget about the countdown. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another week of the Video Vantage podcast. My name is Haley, and I am joined once again by my co host, Mike. And today we're going to be talking about cross functional collaboration and how it can make your business more successful. Thanks for being here with me.
Hey Haley, good to see you again.
So, could you share some examples with us, whether or not it's at Biteable or a previous company, of how cross functional collaborations have impacted overall business success?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to start off, I think maybe by going the opposite direction and just saying like I've seen so many times, like I'm sure a lot of marketers and other folks have seen where like when you're not collaborating across the organization, where campaigns completely fall flat.
Totally.
Um, I think the best, or maybe a good example that was like a lot of groups, not just one other group. When I worked at lynda.com years ago, we were promoting an anniversary of Photoshop, and it had been around for 25 years, I think, at the time. And so we were promoting 25 years of Photoshop, 25 years of lynda.com content, and we collaborated between marketing and the content team and then the video production team at lynda.com, and collaborated with Adobe on a bunch of content. And it was just like this massive organization, organized amount of content to put out between two organizations. And it was just such a success. And I
That's so
think
cool.
if any one department had tried to do it without the other, it just would have fallen flat
Yeah.
because, like, the education part of lynda.com would have been like, we have to just teach something. And the marketing team would have been like, oh, we have to get new subscribers. And Adobe would have been like, oh, we want more signups. But because we were all coming at it collectively, we had a shared goal that was none of those three things. It was just more like, hey, let's just celebrate it and, provide entertainment and some historical context for this great thing.
Yeah.
And so I think when you come together as a group and you set a new shared goal as opposed to an individual goal, I think that's when things really start to take off and the magic happens.
Yeah. I love that way of thinking about it. And maybe it was that collaboration, or maybe you have past experiences again with this, but did you face any kind of hurdles or challenges when you were trying to create the collaboration either between departments or between companies in that scenario?
Yeah, I think that for us the biggest challenge in this specific example was getting each stakeholder, each collaborator to shift their mindset and not be like, well, this is the most important thing.
Sure.
And I totally understand, and I've guilty of it myself, where you come into it with your own point of view and your own perspectives and your own biases, and it takes a little bit of time to kind of like shift your mindset. And so
Yep.
to me, that was one of the biggest challenges there. Um, you know, not at lynda.com, but at other organizations where I've been, where like you have a marketing arm and you have a sales arm. Oftentimes they have very different types of goals. Unfortunately, a lot of marketing and sales teams can have very contentious relationships sometimes,
Of course.
unless you have like really good leadership and shared goals. But that's another challenge that you have to overcome is like, how do you get these two groups that operate differently, they think differently, getting them to get in the same boat and row the oars together. So I think it's just having that shared goal, I think really helps kind of like solve a lot of that problem.
Yeah, I completely agree. Do you have any other tips on how you might be able to make teams, for example, marketing and sales, kind of see eye to eye and overcome those challenges?
I think when you have a leadership team that can really be like, hey, like it's not us against them.
Sure.
It's a we type of a situation now where we're in this together, and it's not just, you know, like in football, it's not just an offense or a defense. Like, we're a team, and if we both succeed, we have greater success than if just one of us succeeds.
Sure.
And
Yep.
so I think when your leadership kind of like pushes that mentality forward and that perspective and then supports it and backs it up, I think teams, whether no matter which part of the organization they're in, will start to have better collaboration.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And do you think when there's better cross collaboration within a company, does that help improve communication of the organization?
I think it forces it, yeah, for sure. And I think, so for example, if you're, marketing and sales, if we just take this example and maybe just run with it for a little bit, if there's not that communication between like, hey, how are things going,
Yeah.
right? Then somebody can't improve. So even more specific. So let's say we've got, if marketing is responsible for leads and delivering marketing qualified leads, if sales doesn't have the communication and the feedback back to the marketing team that like, hey, we thought that this score meant that the lead is qualified. You're giving those people to us, but we talked to them, they're not really qualified. So now we have to adjust our scoring model so that you give us better qualified leads, or we do additional types of qualification. And so if we don't have that feedback and that communication, then you're really going to struggle. I
Right.
think the other one that's really important to communicate is, for like in this example, marketing needs to tell sales, hey, we're running this campaign,
Yeah.
right? Here's a summary of the highlights of the campaign. Here's who we're targeting. Here's what the core message is. Here's what the call to action is. Here's what they're going to be expecting when you get on the phone with them. If you don't communicate that, whether it's in a Notion doc, an email, a video, something, right? You're going to have a lot of challenges down the road.
Of course. And aside from kind of that better communication, what are some of the other advantages of breaking down the silos between departments within an organization?
For breaking down silos, I think when, maybe you've got a couple of stakeholders from each team working together, right, on projects, and they're actually maybe either sitting together or they're having daily conversations so that you can have those kind of conversations that aren't just about work.
Sure.
When you start, meeting somebody at a different level where not, I mean, at a different level of like not just a work level, right?
Yeah.
Where you're
Yeah.
talking about maybe what you did over the weekend or your favorite artist or your favorite band or whomever, right?
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, now I'm kind of like have a connection with this person and I
Absolutely.
want to see that them succeed as well as myself. And then you start acting differently. So
Yes. Yeah. I feel like you genuinely want to help people out more if you like them as a human.
totally, totally.
And can you share any best practices for encouraging that culture of collaboration in a company?
Um, Best practices. I think that for me, what's always helped is when, like, whether it's like the CEO or the head of the department is maybe because is involved in that kickoff
Yep.
to really say like, hey, here is the shared goal, and
Absolutely.
really explain like, hey, I'm going to be asking these three departments, these 3 or 6 people, however many it is, are going to be like leading the effort, but
Yep.
like here's how it really matters. So I think when it's communicated to them what it is they're working on and how it affects the business and how it affects the outcome and what's in it for them, I think that helps get people on the same page very quickly.
Yeah.
With
I
if
completely
when you
agree.
don't do that, it's up to these other people who maybe don't have all this power or ability to get people on different teams to work on something for you.
Yeah.
And getting influencing that is a whole art and skill in and of itself. But if you have to start from scratch on that, it's very difficult and time consuming, and it can hurt the business. So if someone at the leadership level can convey like, hey, this is why it's important. Here are the people who are in charge, right, type of a thing, or who are leading the effort.
Yep.
Um, that can go a long way towards your success.
Yeah, I feel like if it comes from the top down, it kind of eliminates those competing priorities because they're aligning everybody. Like, this is our goal, this is how we'll get there, and this is how each team can play a part in it. So instead of everybody kind of having those individual ideas of what they can do, they're all just focused on one thing.
Yeah, for sure. Because invariably, whether you like it or not, I mean, I've seen it many times where like somebody will say yes in a meeting, and then they walk out the door and like, but I'm being measured by something else, and
Totally.
that impacts my ability to earn more money, take a family vacation, or whatever it is, and then they revert back to their old behavior or their old priority, and they don't focus on the new one, and then it kind of sabotages it intentionally or otherwise.
Completely. And do you think marketing campaigns where there has been cross-functional collaboration, do you think those campaigns resonate more with customers than a campaign that was kind of maybe created and executed just by marketing?
I think so. Um, like so, for example, like when you get somebody like customer success involved, right, or somebody
Yes,
from the product team involved, or ideally both, right? They'll give you different perspectives than you have if you're just focused on the marketing side of things, right?
totally.
Um, you know, we can come up with all the words we want to in marketing and all the graphics and use cases and the flashy videos we want. But if we're not using the words that the customers use, or we're not putting in the context of which they're kind of like that they're living,
Yep,
it'll fall flat every time, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
And I think, the product teams, um, every organization that I've worked at, I've had the benefit of the product teams are spending a lot of time talking to either existing customers or prospective customers, and they're hearing a lot of the natural language that customers or potential customers are going to use when describing your product or the problem they have.
Yeah.
And so when you involve all those people and actively solicit their voice and opinion, then the marketing campaign, in my experience, becomes much stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I feel like the customers can then relate to it too, and they feel like an actual problem that they had is being solved. But if marketing does it alone, then they may not even know it existed in the first place. So they could just like create some wild idea and run with it.
Yeah. Um, a photographer I used to work with years ago once said to me, he goes, "When you create in a vacuum, you suck."
I like
And
that.
that just stuck with me that I'm like, I mean, it's funny, it's catchy, it
Yeah.
was an off the cuff remark, but it's so
Mhm.
true. Like if you just sit in your own little bubble and
Yes.
just try to do it yourself, it's not going to be as good
Yeah,
as if you collaborate with other people.
absolutely. I feel like it's not as good for many reasons. Even creating something on your own isn't nearly as fun as working with somebody else to create something.
I agree with you 100%.
Which is actually the perfect segue into my final question for you. Do you think when there is cross functional collaboration, that increases the innovation and creativity that can be shown in a campaign?
I think it does. Whether it's you know, a new way to present the information, right? Maybe there's a different, um, you know, so for example, I don't know, let's take a web example, right? If you're making maybe a microsite for a new product launch, invariably there are going to be people who have seen other examples of how to present something, whether it's how animating a feature detail or how the experience should be on the website that you haven't seen before, or they know how to implement it and you don't because you maybe don't have that background. You're really focused on the marketing, but you don't know about implementing something on a website. Having that input from other people will make your campaign more creative, maybe
Totally.
more innovative. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And it's so interesting to hear their ideas too. Sometimes, even if somebody doesn't work on marketing, or maybe they do and you just don't work with them often, they can come up with these really creative ideas and
Hmm.
concepts. And it's like, that's fantastic. Why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, or like I don't know, you might say something and it doesn't work, but if
Yep.
it's encourages or spurs somebody else's idea on something else, right?
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be your idea. It can be
absolutely.
the spark that somebody else needed to go like, oh, what if we did this instead?
Yes, I
Brilliant.
completely
Let's do that.
agree. I love when
Yeah.
those moments happen. It just kind of comes out of nowhere and you're like, wait, that's the aha moment.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's like when, you know, the sum really is greater than the parts of the whole, right? Where it's like, oh, wait, this was way better because we collaborated than if any one of us had done it by ourselves. So.
I completely agree. And that wraps us up right on time today. So, Mike, thanks for joining me for another week of the Video Vantage. And thanks to everyone who tuned in. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Mike.